morning, everyone. This is Tom Wilder with the North Carolina Department of Labor, and welcome to our Scaffolds webinar. Um, Again, my name is Tom Wilder. I'll be your instructor today. A lot of you already know me. I've worked about 6 years with the Department of Labor. Prior to that, I worked for 28 years in various safety training and quality management positions in the textile, machine assembly, and pharmaceutical industries. Most of those years were in pharmaceutical manufacturing, from which I'm now retired. A little bit about me. Many of you know our logistics, but I will go ahead and cover those. Look around your work area and try to limit any distractions. If you have an office, you might want to close the door, turn phones off. You're in a cube. Use headphones and put up a do not disturb note. Today, again, we're using Webinauto tool. You'll see the PowerPoint slides in the center. I'll advance those as we go through the class. In the bottom left corner, we'll see an emoji. I will not be using that. But on the bottom, we'll be using a chat box, which a lot of you have already used to say good morning. So I'll be getting your questions and comments from the chat box. You must attend at least 80% of the class to receive credit. After the class, I'll look at your login time duration to see if you can get credit or not based on your login time. And we can't give credit to anyone who's sitting around you that's not registered. So if you're not registered for the class, if you're sitting around a computer, you're not going to get credit, only the person that's registered. You will get a certificate within 3 weeks. Otherwise, you'll give us a call here at the Department of Labor, and you'll give us a call at 919-707-7864, but you should receive your certificate within 3 weeks. We're scheduled for an hour and a half. We'll see how it goes today. This is a huge subject, a lot of slides. I'll try to go through those quickly and make sure we cover the subject and you actually learn something else about scaffolds today that you didn't already know. So those are our logistics, and let's go ahead and begin. And let me go ahead and ask you, what is a scaffold? If somebody asks you what a scaffold is, what would you say? You can go ahead and type in your answer to that. What is a scaffold? A work platform, correctly. That's right, Todd. And Spencer added a raised temporary platform. So it is an elevated temporary platform to complete work. You all got the answer combined. You got everything I'm looking for, a raised platform. Now when we're going to talk about scaffolds today, we got 3 categories that we're going to talk about with scaffolds. What are the major types of scaffolds? I'm not talking about every little type. I'm talking about the groups. The groupings for scaffolds. Let's say grouping. Supported. That's right, Sandra. A supported scaffold. Okay, that's one of them. Suspended, Wesley. Right, and Mark says mobile. So in the third group, we have a lot of other types of scaffolds. You've got mobile scaffolds, man lifts, hoist, scissors lifts, lots of different types of scaffolds. Now, one thing I'll go ahead and tell you, I looked at the national statistics for scaffolds from federal OSHA, and as far as serious violations that are cited in construction, scaffolds is number 1. Well, actually not number 1, but fall protection is number 1, but scaffolds actually number 8 for fall protection. So OSHA compliance officers are citing fall protection. That's the top citing for scaffolds nationally is fall protection. So how high up on a scaffold do you need to be? Let's say a supported scaffold. How high off the ground are you regulated? Of course, Mark went ahead and told us 10 feet. So somebody's working at 10 feet and they don't have a fall protection, a personal fall arrest system or railing, then there's going to be a citation. So fall protection is number 8 nationally for construction violations. And I'll go ahead and give you the other ones. The actual number 1 is general fall protection. 2 is ladders, not extended 3 feet above landing. 3 is eye and face protection. 4 is training on fall protection. 5 is fall protection, unprotected sides and edges. 6 is head protection. 7 is aerial lifts, which is in the category of what we're talking about, scaffolds today. And then 8 is scaffolds. Fall protection for roofing is 9. And inspections by competent person is number 10. So those are the top citations nationally for all the ocean inspectors nationwide. Now, if we're talking about scaffolds and the different devices that are considered equipment that's considered scaffolds, the number 1 citation within that group is aerial lifts, fall protection while in the basket. Number 2 is fall protection above 10 feet. 3 is safe access above 2 feet. And then number 4 is all working levels shall be fully planked. And number 5 is protection by a personal fall arrest system or guardrail system. So those are the national statistics. Now let me go ahead and do a couple of things I usually do on my webinar. I want to go ahead and do a couple of instant polls. And first I want to ask your professional safety experience. How many years of professional safety experience do you have? So this will give me an idea how my class falls out as far as professional safety experience. So I see everybody's answering. This is a good interactive activity. As you can see, we have a few new people to safety. We have people who are working on their experience 1 to 5. Then we have veterans from 5 to 10, and then we have several people that have over 10 years experience. And one thing I will tell you is a lot of the experienced folks, there's a lot that you're not going to learn because you already know it, but I do have to cover everything for our beginners because we do have at least 7 right now people that have 0 to 1 year experience. Now I'm going to stop the poll and close it, and I want to go ahead and ask my other question I like is experience level with this topic. We want to look at your experience level with this particular topic to see how you fall out with this particular topic. As you can see, we've got several beginners, several intermediate folks as far as your scaffold experience, and we have a few advanced scaffold folks online, so we may have some actual experts on scaffolds. And we love your input, especially from your experts. We're sharing information today on our training, so if there's anything you want to add, feel free to add it. So I'm going to go ahead and stop that poll and close it. And we'll go ahead and go to our first slide, or actually second slide. So we're going to talk about the requirements, design, safe design, setup and use, hazard ID, and abatement methods for scaffolds. Now I've got a little tiny picture. Now you've got a little tiny PowerPoint slide on your screen. Now what you can do is you can maximize your screen. There's a little box on your screen where you can maximize it to see the slide better. But remember, when you maximize it, you will not be able to see your chat. So you may be going back and forth to that maximize button. But for those of you who can see that little picture in there, a little photo, what type of scaffold is that? What type of scaffold is that on the side of that building? All right, Wesley, that's a suspended scaffold. So again, we're going to be talking about it. Jim, you're all correct. Anybody that typed in suspended, you're exactly right. Now, again, as we go through the standards, we're going to talk about the scope, general requirements and additional requirements, aerial lifts, and training requirements. And there are a lot of appendixes to scaffolds. These are all non-mandatory, but they got good information about specs, uh, safe access and protection of erectors and dismantlers, national standards, training topics, drawings, and like I said, all those are non-mandatory appendices. Now, what OSHA standard did scaffolds just come out of? What did scaffolds come out of? What OSHA standard? Think walking working surfaces. What standard book is that in? No, we're not talking about subpart K. What standard book? If you have a standards book, okay, those are all good answers. If you have a book, an OSHA standards book, what standards book did the scaffolds come out of? If you got a new one. Okay, now it's still in construction. That's 1926. So scaffolds are in 1926. What's the other? Yeah, there we go, Jim. 1910, Christina, Mark. Scaffolds, if you're in general industry and you're using scaffolds, say for maintenance, if you have a scaffold set up, scaffolds used to be in the general industry standard. Now, if you're using scaffolds at all, even if you're in general industry work, you're going to be going to the construction standard. So that it's not that you can't use scaffolds in industry settings for maintenance. It's just that you're regulated by the construction standard. So that walking working surfaces standard that was just rewritten, if you go to scaffolds in it, it says go to the construction standard 1926. Okay, let's keep going. Now we're going to cover all types of scaffolds, including supported, suspended aerial lifts, but not crane or derrick suspended platforms covered by another standard. Now, the scaffolds need to be designed by a qualified person and loaded by the design. And then, like I said, you can look into the appendix for more information. Now, what are the major things? If you set up this scaffold here, this is a pretty big scaffold setup. What are the major things you're looking for when you're looking at that scaffold? So you're looking for major things. Access, okay. Is there proper access? Is it anchored to the building if necessary? Is it fully planked? Is it braced? Now, if you're measuring the scaffold, what might you be measuring? Okay, the platforms, okay. The width. Okay. Okay, the guardrails, overhang, those are all great answers. Toe boards, guardrails. But you want the scaffold to be plumb. What does plumb mean? P-L-U-M-B, plumb. It needs to be plumb. Okay, now plumb would be like straight up and down, like Mark, what you're saying. So if you put a level, you either put a level beside it or a device, you could use your iPhone, whatever. You know, if it's straight up and down, what degree would what would the degree reading be? What degrees is straight up and down? Straight up would be 90 degrees or 0 on the level. Okay, so you want it to be plumb, and then you want the scaffold to be level. So you want it to be plumb, you want it to be level, and you want it to be square. I mean, like this particular scaffold, if you're looking at it and it's contorted, kind of bent out of shape, or it doesn't look right, it might not be square. Plumb, level, and square. So, and plus, you've typed in a lot of the other things that we're looking for today for a good setup. Now, I hate even calling this a scaffold. Uh, how many of you would work off of this? Yeah, right, Mark. Of course you wouldn't. Who do you think? Who do you think took this photo? Who took this photo that we have here? Compliance. Robert. Robert's a good answer because Robert's taken a lot of photos. But a compliance officer is driving along. They see a construction site. They see something like this. Um, that's bad news. That's bad news for a lot of people. The best thing that person could get is a citation for that. The worst news is that thing breaks away and somebody falls. And depending on their fall, you could have all kinds of injuries all the way up to fatalities. Okay, now the scaffold should be supporting at least 4 times the intended load. That's the people, equipment, and supplies. And now we also see a compliance picture. Like I said, we get a lot of our photos from compliance. What do you see wrong with this? Now it's really hard for you to see because that picture is so small on your screen. What you see anything wrong? Okay, okay, guardrail. Okay, yeah, a lot. That's a great answer. A lot. Okay, you've got access. So how's that person getting up there? Toe boards, not plumb, uh, lack of bracing, and like I said, they're set that scaffold up on a roof. So that scaffold's set up on a roof, and I have an idea there are probably some mixed parts in there. You can't mix parts from different types of scaffolds, um, and there's a rope and a bucket up there, so there's a pulley system. And like I said, depending on the weight, if you're using a pulley to raise a bucket, depending on the setup, you could pull that whole setup over. So this is pretty much what we call a train wreck setup here. We got a train wreck here, and unfortunately, we see this kind of stuff all the time. You would not believe how many photos I've seen of bad scaffold setups. So then we get to platform should be fully planked between the uprights. Okay, that's pretty well set. Okay, we had a mention here, no hard hat. Okay, that is so small. Oh yeah, one of those workers may not have a hard hat on. It's really, I'd have to blow that up. But hard hats are required. That's a great comment. Okay, now we're going to get into a lot of specification slides. Now, some of those specs I'm going to read to you. This is just straight out of the standard. No more than 1 inch between adjacent um, units, unless you're trying to fit it around an upright, which you'd have a maximum of 9.5 inches. Platforms for walking or performing erections should be at least 18 inches wide. And platforms for these devices or types of scaffold should be at least 12 inches wide. We got a ladder jack, top plate bracket, roof bracket, and a pump jack scaffold. Now we're looking at a pump jack scaffold, and these are extremely common. I bet you, I'm a trainer, I'm not a compliance officer, but if I'm driving around the city or the state, I'd be willing to bet you of the ones that I see, I bet you at least 70 or 80% of the pump jacks I see or not set up right that can be cited. Now, this, and I'm going to show you a proper pump jack drawing later on. What is wrong, just glancing at this pump jack, what do you see right away that's wrong? What do you see wrong with this pump jack? What about, okay, now here's a ladder. Here's a ladder coming up here. Now there is a problem. There are two problems with that ladder. What are the two problems with the ladder? And Candace, you got the answer there, and we're going to get to it. Okay, the ladder is not 3 feet above the where it's contacting there. When you're going to another level, you have to have 3 feet to give you something to hold on to when you get off the ladder. Now that ladder angle, that ladder seems to be set out way too wide. So I have an idea, the ladder angle and the length over the edge there is too low. Now, Candace, I believe it was Candace, let's scroll back. She has the first answer I was looking for. And boy, okay. There's no guard, and a lot of you said this, no fall protection, no guardrails. Yeah, there we go, Candace. And several other people have said that as well. If you've got a worker on there, if they're not wearing a personal fall arrest system, if there's no guardrails here on the end, then this could be cited. There are a lot of pump jacks out there that don't have fall protection on the ends, and you got a worker on there and they don't have any other fall arrest system on them. So you could be cited for fall protection. Okay, let's keep going. Now, of course, this slide talks about the front edge of platforms should be no more than 14 inches from the face of the work. And then there's an exception of 3 inches and 18 inches for these other exceptions that are mentioned, but it's generally 14 inches. Now, again, the end of platform must go over the support at least 6 inches, because people walking on a platform, that thing can vibrate and move and actually fall, unless cleated. So is it cleated or hooked on there, or is it the board just laying on there? If you got platforms that are 10 feet or shorter, they can't extend more than 12 feet over the support. Not 12 feet, I'm sorry, 12 inches, and definitely not 12 feet. Not more than 12 inches over the support, because if it extends out too far, your worker is going to be thinking about their work and they're going to step out too far, and that plank's going to flip on them. Now, if you got platforms more than 10 feet, you can't go over 18 inches over the support. This is pretty basic. So the competent person for the site, the competent person has to be, they have to do an inspection of that scaffold daily before use, and they're going to be looking at platforms and full planking and all. And like I said, each abutted end of a scaffold plank must be on a separate support surface. So the end of each border plank must be on its own surface and not on another scaffold. Now, I just thought about something for a second. Let me go back real quick to this one. Now, there are other issues with this one that we didn't mention. Look at this support coming from the other side. Look at the other side of the building. This pump jack, this is not even set up right. So we got some stuff going on from the other side. So this is, again, what we call a pump jack train wreck here. a minute ago, I should have mentioned on this other side we have issues as well. So there's several. Now let me get back to where we were. Okay, let's keep going. Scaffold components must not be intermixed. Now, what about that picture shows you that those are intermixed components? How can you tell from that picture? Different colors, that's right, colors. That's right. So I don't think anybody just decided to take a particular scaffold and take the parts apart and start painting them different colors. These are parts from um, different scaffolds. Now, what is that worker doing wrong there? Did we see this all the time? What is the worker doing? He's doing something. Climbing the cross brace. So climbing the cross braces are not engineered for that, and that's a serious issue when you see people climbing the cross brace. Okay, now your competent person, when you're setting up a scaffold, the competent person for the company needs to be involved, and they should be fully knowledgeable of the proper setup for that scaffold. They're looking at the situation, they're looking at the weather, they're looking at everything. And that competent person, if a scaffold is in use, let's say you're the competent person. Let's say the competent person took this picture. Let's say the competent person's on the ground for the site, for the job, and they're looking up there and seeing this guy climbing. What should the competent person do? I mean, the competent person should do something here. If, let's say they're just watching, stop the work, say something. We need to get that worker down safely. And of course, the competent person may say, "Hey, I'm really doing well today. The guy was climbing the cross brace, and I called him out on it." Now, the person that climbing the cross brace could come back and say something to the competent person. That person can say, "Yeah, I shouldn't have been climbing the cross brace, but this scaffold setup is wrong, and who is responsible for that? The proper setup of the scaffold. The competent person." Right, say something or tag it out. But that setup should never have been put in use to begin with. So we got two issues here. If that person that's climbing is not the competent person, which I wouldn't think he is, if there is a competent person there watching, they've made a lot of errors there in the setup of all that. And if that person falls to their death, then a lot of problems. Now, if you got a professional engineer, if you had a professional engineer sign off something, they could be involved as well. Okay, now if we build these scaffolds taller and taller and taller, then we have to start essentially tying them off to the structure, guying, tying, bracing, or equivalent. And it says 4-to-1. So what is that? You're saying 4 times something to determine where you need that first tie off. So if that scaffold, I don't know, let's say the base of the scaffold is 5 feet by 8 feet. What would the tie-off point be? What would the tie-off point be? What height? Let's say 8 by 5 at the bottom. Okay, still not seeing the answer. 4 times the minimum dimension of the base. 20 feet, Michael, that's right. 20 feet, that's your first tie off. Your base of your scaffold is 5 feet by 8 feet. So 5 feet is the smaller dimension. 4 times 5 is 20. So say if a compliance officer or an inspector, somebody came in there, they would say you have to have a tie off at 20 feet. And Federal OSHA's got some, there's a quick card, there's a Federal OSHA quick card that talks about tie-offs, supported scaffold inspection tips. You can go to Federal OSHA and you can print out a handout on that as well. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Okay, we must install everything by manufacturer specs. And I am not going to read that slide to you. So, and there's a connection here, as you can see. Poles, legs, frames, uprights must bear on base plates and mud seals to give a firm foundation. And the second bullet says, if you're on a concrete slab, you don't need a mud seal. Now, what is a mud seal? You can look at the picture and see a mud seal. What is a mud seal? I know somebody on here knows. We got some experts online. What is a mud seal? Okay, that support base. Okay. Okay, right. There are pieces of wood there that's under the base plate of the scaffold, the base plate. That base plate needs to be on a mud seal. Now that could be a section of a board like those, or it could be a long board, but it's a mud seal to keep, like Jim says, to keep the whole scaffold from sinking into the ground. Now, if you're on concrete, that's not going to happen, so your base plate can be just right there on top of the concrete. Okay, here's a really good close-up showing the mud seal. So right here, you've got the mud seal, and you got the base plate here, and a screw jack here to help level the scaffold, and here's an access ladder going up. So this is what we expect to see. Now we also see stuff like this, unstable objects. We've got a real problem here. Unstable objects. Let's say, can you put a base plate on top of a concrete or cinder block? I'll say not concrete, but cinder block. Cinder block. Can you do that? No. You cannot use a concrete block to put a base plate on or scaffold on. No way, like Wesley said. Okay. Now we're back to that picture. We see the picture. Now, if a compliance officer, OSHA compliance officer comes in, or an insurance company inspector comes in, or a corporate safety auditor comes in, and they see that, what do you think? Now this picture, what do I not see? What do I not see in this picture? I don't see something. People, that's right. Is it with right, and a lot of other, Wesley, it's like you say, almost everything else is wrong as well. But a compliance officer has to prove exposure to an employee, that somebody was up there standing on that. and they can tell by interviewing employees, and there are different things they can look at to show that somebody was actually up there. And then they may even ask, how was that even built? So I wouldn't want to work for a company that does this kind of stuff. That would be scary. That would be really scary to me to know that there are employers out there that are setting up this sort of thing. Now, unstable objects can't be used as working platforms. So what is that person standing on? You might not be able to tell. Okay, that's a bucket. That's right. So you can't take these elevated work platforms and put boxes and buckets and other things up there to give you more height, ladders. You don't want to put any of that stuff, whether it's stable or not. You're not going to be putting stuff up there to give you more height, because when you raise somebody up too high as far as the guardrails can't even do their job. Front end loaders must not be used to support platforms unless designed by the manufacturer. Now, if you have a scaffold platform, it has to be properly engineered and designed and attached to the forks. And if you do have, like, say, rough terrain forklifts, and you have those platforms, like I said, it has to be properly installed. So here we go. Plumbing and bracing is important. Now here we have suspension scaffolds. Now, if you're working on that suspension scaffold, you're one of those people up there on it. Do they need fall protection? Do they need a personal fall arrest system? Yes, they do. So you're going to have lifelines. Not you have these lines that cables, whatever, that are suspending the actual scaffold, but you're going to have lifelines coming down for the workers to attach to, because we see in the news all the time where the wind gets involved with these things, or they have failures, and next thing you know, you have a worker dangling by their lifeline, which actually saves their life. Now, if you follow the news this week, there were 2 fatalities at Disney World. They're building a hotel down there. They had a supported scaffold. From what I heard on the news, a supported scaffold came down, and I guess they're still investigating it, but 2 people died. So again, from these types of falls, it's not uncommon anywhere in the United States. Okay, so suspension scaffold support devices must be properly installed and supported. Like I said, there's a lot of engineering involved. Here's the lifeline I'm talking about for this worker that's wearing his personal fall arrest system. Use proper counterweights. Now, your major companies, they're in the construction business. Seldom, in my opinion, are you going to see them take a suspended scaffold and just rig it up with stuff that's not approved as part of that system. And they're going to assemble it and disassemble it properly. So most of the time, you're not going to see them using parts that don't go with it, or using other counterweights. Probably not going to see it. Tiebacks, properly engineered and secured and then properly installed. Like I said, I'm not going to read you a bunch of specifications today. But when you have scaffolds set up, the question you're going to ask is, how does somebody get up there? So you got ladders that are portable, hook-on, stair towers, attachable stairway type ladders, and prefab scaffold access ladders. Now, there's a big difference, as you guys know, and ladies, there's a big difference between the scaffold frame and the scaffold ladder. So you don't want employees climbing the frame or climbing the cross braces. You want them climbing an actual ladder. Okay, now I've done a lot of talking here. Uh, does anybody have any comments, questions, or are we good to go? Hey, how we doing? Are we good to go? All right. All right. After the webinar, I'll go through the chat and make sure that I didn't miss any questions because sometimes it flies by and I'll miss it. So I'll look at it. Okay. Scaffold stairs. All this says is it needs to be installed per the OSHA standards, which is per the specifications of the company that manufactured the scaffold stairs. So if you have scaffold stairs that you've bought from a company and these all meet like ANSI standards, unless they're damaged and they're put together right, I wouldn't spend much time going out and measuring all this. Okay, integral access using access frames. Like I said, if you have built-in ladders or whatever, they need to be built to specification. And that's more specifications. If you want to read specifications, you can again go to the OSHA standard and see what all these specs are. If they're properly installed, you're going to meet all these numbers here. Here's our fellow again we saw a few minutes ago climbing the cross brace. And like I said, unfortunately that's common. And that's a little bit tricky anyway, climbing up a diagonal cross brace and then trying to climb over the edge onto that platform. There's a good chance that person's going to get hurt. Okay, we don't want to overload the scaffold. You're going to have your competent person involved as far as inspection. And if we see anything wrong, we're going to take the scaffold out of service. How do you take a scaffold out of service? That's right, red tag it out. So with your company, not only, you're going to tag out scaffolds, ladders, any equipment that doesn't pass inspection, you're going to put a do not use. You're going to in many cases, that's going to be a red tag. You're going to tag it out. Okay, the competent person is involved in the proper setup. The competent person is responsible for making sure people don't work in conditions where it's dangerous, like if you have snow and ice, and no work during storms. You can see a lot of debris and stuff. Okay, Wesley, that's enough. Let's go ahead and look at Wesley's comment. And we were going to get to that, but that's fine. We'll go ahead and talk about it. Power lines. High voltage lines, generally speaking, how far should you be away from them? At least how far? 10 feet. And then depending on the voltage, you do have to keep on increasing your distance depending on the voltage of those lines. And I believe that is a slide that we're going to see later. But I appreciate it. Anytime you're using anything that you're building that's tall, always look around for power lines. Okay, wow, how about that? I guess you guys are psychic. I have a feeling this power line slide is coming up. And this is talking about insulated and uninsulated lines. So you're going to have more distance from an insulated line than you are an uninsulated line. Okay. Fall protection. So some of these scaffolds that you use are not only going to be properly erected, But some of them you have to have a personal fall arrest system on them as well. Like a suspended scaffold, you got fall arrest system. So if you've got a supported scaffold, if you got guardrails, you don't need it. It just depends on the type of scaffold that we're using. Okay, now here, what kind of scaffold? This is technically a scaffold setup. What kind of scaffold is this? Ladder jack. That's exactly right. That's a ladder jack. I'll get with you on the same page of music here. Ladder jack. Now, a bad one. Yeah. Now, what if you're working from a plank, and let's pretend that this is a proper ladder jack setup. If you got a platform between two ladders like this, first of all, I'm thinking of myself, and I don't care whether I'm an employee or I'm at home. Now, I don't have this kind of setup at my house, but I mean, I've got extension ladder, but I don't have this type of equipment. I don't think you could get me to work off of that system. Now, one thing, even if it's installed properly, it's a scary feeling to work off a ladder jack like this. Now, what is required for that person? What's required in this situation? If it's properly installed, what about that person that's standing there? What does he or she have to have? Fall protection, fall arrest system, harness. If you want to have a scary feeling, get way up on a ladder jack like this and stand up there and don't hold on to anything. That's a scary feeling to begin with. Now let's get a little bit more technical. Let's say you got a ladder jack like this. Can the person access that platform climbing the ladder that it's set up on? Can they do that? Okay, Mark says you'd rather be on a ladder jack than a pump jack. The answer is actually no. You cannot access the ladder jack platform by climbing the actual ladder. So you have to have another way to access it. So it gets complicated. Now, we had a comment there about pump jacks. I'd rather be on a ladder jack than a pump jack. Now, some of the pump jacks I've seen, that may be the case. But there's some really good pump jack setups that I might want to use. But none of the ones that I've seen in the pictures that we have do I want to get on it. And I don't guess I ever have to worry about using one anyway because it's not what I do. Okay, so the person that's on the suspended scaffold needs a personal fall arrest system, a lifeline, a personal fall arrest system. That's all that slide says. And you must provide fall protection if feasible. Now, 99.9% of the time, fall protection is going to be feasible. If somebody's up there without fall protection, a competent person must be able to defend the reason they don't have fall protection. But through anything, through engineering, I can't think of too many cases where you couldn't protect people from falls. Okay, this talks about guardrail systems. So you can read those comments if you'd like, but guardrails must be compliant. Okay. Cross bracing can be used sometimes as guardrails as long as the bracing falls within those ranges for the top and mid rail. Okay, now this is obviously an easy question. Would you rather work on the left setup or the right? Left, of course, because we beat this thing to death. If you don't know the answer to that, then you haven't been listening today or awake. Okay, hard hats are required for employees on scaffolds, no matter what. Okay, so hard hats are required, and sometimes in the OSHA standards, you'll see those referred to as hard hats, or sometimes referred to as protective helmets. Whether it's referred to as a protective helmet or hard hat, they are required on scaffolds. And if your toe boards, if you erect toe boards on your scaffolds and you have stuff that's higher that can get kicked off above your toe boards, you have to have something on the sides of your setup to prevent things from coming off, or put netting under there, to a containment net. Now, if you have a construction site where you don't have catch nets and you have things that can fall way outside the work zone, then you need to, again, establish a work zone or hazard area for somebody not even to be able to enter. And you got to think about what could actually fall from this scaffold. Now, let's go ahead and ask this question. If you had a hard hat on, is that always all you need? Is a hard hat going to protect you from anything that can fall from the scaffold? No. And if you go onto YouTube, you can see some videos where people take hard hats and they drop objects from height to show how protected those hard hats are. They're a good idea, but I mean, if had a hard hat on and an entire cube of bricks came down, I don't think I'm going to survive that if all that fell on me at once. Okay. Now, like I said a minute ago, if you got materials that are piled high, you might want to put paneling or screening from the toe board to the top of the guardrail to keep stuff from coming off of there. Yeah, Wesley, a brick will always win that battle. That's true. Okay, toe boards are standard 3.5-inch height, which, like I said, a board that's a 4-inch board is technically 3.5 inches, securely fastened. I think we all know that. Pole scaffold, here are some specifications on pole scaffolds. I'm going to not specifications on pole scaffolds. I'm going to not read all that to you. Like I said, if you're setting up something, you can go to the OSHA standards and your instructions to make sure everything's set up properly. Now, if you got a pole scaffold over 60 feet in height, that must be designed by a registered professional engineer. So when you get out of the normal design specifications of some of these scaffolds, you need to get an engineering, professional engineer sign off on it, a PE. Okay, tube and coupler scaffolds, if they're over 125 feet in height, again, you've got to get a professional engineer involved. Again, fabricated frame, 125 or more, get your professional engineer to be involved in, they got to sign off on that. Now, unfortunately, we don't have pictures in our presentation of all the scaffolds that we have listed here. So I'm going to turn my camera on here for just a second, and I'm going to hold up some drawings of some scaffolds, and you're going to see the presenter. Just don't pay any attention to him. Let's just look at the drawings. We don't want to see him, but let me go ahead and put some of these up for you to see. So let's go ahead and turn the camera on. And here I am. So we got a single point adjustable scaffold. Okay, single point adjustable scaffold right here. We've got a 2-point swing stage, 2-point swing stage scaffold. We've got a bricklayer square scaffold. We've got a horse scaffold. Here's a horse scaffold. A roof bracket scaffold. Roof bracket scaffold. And here's our pump jack. Now here's a pump jack scaffold, but you see that it's got fall protection on the ends. That's the way all of them should look. Unless you have your worker in a personal fall arrest system, then that's what it should look. Now let me go ahead, I've got some more. This window jack scaffold. Like I said, a person could train on this topic for a month because there's so much there. Then we have a crawling board or a chicken ladder. That's covered by the standard. That's called a chicken ladder or a crawling board. Now you might see a roofer use one of these that would still have to use fall protection. Now what do you see people using instead of this? What do you see them use? Okay, rope's a good answer, not what I'm looking for. I'm telling something that's not proper. Foam's a good idea, not what I'm looking for. Cushion. What's long that has things that go, yeah, regular ladder, Candace, that's right. Or just a 2x4 across the roof. So this, but somebody will try to simulate a chicken ladder by taking a regular ladder and laying it on the roof. Now here's a trestle ladder scaffold. We've got a needle beam suspended scaffold. We have a float or a ship scaffold. Float or ship. A catenary scaffold. We have an interior hung scaffold. We even have a multi-level scaffold. A form scaffold. And an outrigger scaffold. And I think I've shown you a bunch of drawings here. So that'll give you a little bit more of an idea of what these look like. Of course, you in construction, you've already seen a lot of this. Let's go ahead and go back to the slides and get this guy off of here. Let's go to the slides. So when we see these words on this slide, at least you'll have an idea, if you've never seen these, what they actually look like. Okay. So the roof bracket must fit the pitch of the roof, and level support platform must be 12 inches wide. And again, you see the different types: secure and braced, pump jack scaffold. You got your approved triangular bracing. And like I said, we still have issues with this one. Workbenches can't be used as a scaffold platform. Is there safe access to this scaffold? Do you think there's safe access to this scaffold? No. No, there's not safe access. And like I said, we've got lots of issues here: safe access and fall protection. Wood poles properly constructed. Now this again, this is that terrible picture. This is a train wreck. We've got two setups, one on each side of the building, and they're sharing components. Again, we got a train wreck here. And we do have pump jacks violations here. Now, we also see a suspended bucket there. I'd want to look at that. But we've got no safe access. And we have fall protection issues here as well. Now here's the ladder jack again. So again, not what I would like to be working from, but again, here are the specs for ladder jacks. If you use them, you can go back to the standard 1926 452K and read all the requirements for ladder jack scaffolds. Mobile scaffolds. Now I'm sure a lot of you have these. They have to have locking wheels, and we're not going to roll people around when they're on these. And we have to be, concerned about the safety of the worker up there. Employees are not any part of scaffold that stands beyond wheels. Okay. Again, specifications here. Now, then we're going to get into mobile scaffolds. Now, this is a special type of mobile scaffold here. Now, this is not the type that I'm thinking of. What kind of mobile scaffold do we probably see more than anything? Mobile scaffold. What type of mobile scaffold do we see a lot? Scissors lift is what I'm looking for. Now, boom lift is a good answer, but actually a boom lift is what we call an aerial lift. A scissors lift is considered to be a mobile scaffold. That's exactly right, Eric. It is a mobile scaffold. Now, this is not a scissors lift, but now, let's talk about scissors lifts for a second. Now, what we're looking at in this picture is not a scissors lift, but by OSHA, are people that work off of scissors lifts, are they required to wear personal fall arrest system? Required by OSHA. No, that's right. Now, I've got to tell you now that there's no requirement by OSHA at any feet because they are fully railed all the way around. Now, some of you may work for a company that requires your worker to be tied off in a scissors lift. And companies can go beyond the OSHA requirement. That's fine. So what do a lot of scissors lifts have in them if you want to tie off? Anchor point. That's right, Wesley. So I know of companies that go beyond those requirements and they say, we want you to be tied off in this scissors lift, even though it's fully railed. Now, when you're tying somebody off inside of a scissors lift, the way I tie them off, I really don't want them to go over the rail. So you could give them the wrong lanyard. You could give them something that's way too long or something that would allow them to go over the rail. I want to keep them within the railing. So you might use a retractable or a yo-yo or a positioning lanyard that's short, but you want to keep people in that space. If that person has the wrong lanyard on and they go over the side of a scissors lift, what's likely, depending on what, let's say they go over the side end of a scissors lift, they got a long lanyard on, what's likely to happen? Tip over. That's right. So when you think about keeping people in these scissors lifts, uh, you're thinking about positioning and in restraint. So actually, technically speaking, you could have a safety. You could have a belt, a safety belt with D-rings on it, and positioning in there that would not allow somebody to fall. You could use positioning belt, or you could use a harness, and you could use the actual positioning rings for positioning. Or if you're using it for positioning, you can tie off to the side rings or the front ring if you have them, or you may end up tying off to the D ring in the back. Okay. Now, what about aerial lifts? Now, an aerial lift and a scissors lift are not the same. So if you have an articulating bucket or platform that moves up and down and back and forth and in and out, do you have to be tied off there? Yes, that's right, Mark. So one thing we don't want to ever do is confuse scissors lifts and aerial lifts. But some companies require tie off in both, and if you do, just make sure that you wear the proper gear for that device. Now, I showed you bunches of pictures a minute ago to give you an idea of what all these scaffolds, they're all called scaffolds, look like. Aerial lifts, again, we've talked about them. Now, one thing we do see sometimes is we'll see somebody, what do compliance officers see people doing wrong? Okay, let's say the person's tied up. Let's say they're connected. But what do we see people doing wrong on an aerial lift besides being connected? Okay, outside the bucket, what if it has rails? Standing on the guardrails. That's right, Brian. Climb on the rails. Access another level by climbing out of the bucket or the guardrails. Could there ever be a safe way to do that? Ever be a safe way? Let's say you got a platform and you're trying to get out of there. Could there ever be a safe way to do that? Where there would be no hazard? Okay, rested on a roof. Okay, what if you had, what if your D-ring, what if you're connected in the lift and you had another D-ring, not D-ring, a clip, and you were able to access another anchor outside that was above that would support? If I'm connected and I don't have any hazard of falling, then there wouldn't be a hazard. But we'll see people transitioning and there's no fall protection, a transition connection point. Okay, right, Mark. So there are ways that that could be done, but we'll see people climbing the rail and there's no, um, you just can't do it. You can't do it if there's any fall hazard. You just can't do it. And here we go. Here's a picture right here. Like I said, people do that. Authorized people to operate, they have to be trained. Employees must always stand firmly on the floor of the basket or the bucket, whatever it is. Aerial lifts, brakes must be set. Don't exceed the limits. Don't move it when in working position. Now, if you're driving an aerial lift on a construction site and you're not connected, is it possible for that person to be bounced out of that lift? Bounced out if they're not connected? Yes, of course. That's ever happened, and actually that can happen pretty easily. You are all correct. Okay, body belt. Okay, now here's the thing about body belts. Body belts can never be used as fall protection because if there's a possibility of an actual fall, a body belt can like cut you in half. But if you have a positioning system that will not allow you to go over an edge, go over a rail, you can use body belts for positioning. So body belts are never used for fall protection anymore, but they can be used for positioning only. Okay, here we got the scissors lift. I couldn't remember if we had that picture in here. Scissors lifts are not aerial lifts. They have their own little section, and they meet the definition of a scaffold, and they must comply with the requirements of a mobile scaffold. Okay, so again, we got the scissors lift here. We see those all the time. Okay, so let's say we have to train people to work on a scaffold. Whoever trains must be qualified. And you're going to talk about the nature of fall and falling object hazards. You're going to talk about working around electrical lines, erecting, protection systems from falling objects, low capacities. So you're going to pretty much cover all this when you train somebody. Now, your competent person, the people that are building the scaffold system, if it's something that needs to be built, the competent person is the one that is responsible for that training, because the competent person has the authority to say, this is not right, we can't use this scaffold must be taken out of service, or you're not using the scaffold right. So your competent person has the authority from the company to stop work, stop erection, not approve something for use. Retraining. If you see somebody is doing something wrong, they need to be retrained. So if they're climbing the cross brace instead of the ladder, things change on the work site. You might need to retrain them, or you put them on a different type of scaffold. Or you see somebody's being trained, but they're just not doing the right thing. They don't get it. Anytime you have training, make sure that the employee assures that they understand everything they need to know and do. That's why we have training forms. We have the employees sign. And companies I've worked for in the past, a lot of them, we would have statements in the bottom. My signature on this training document means that I understand what was covered in this session. And we would tell the employee, if you've been trained and you don't understand what we taught you, then we're not going to let you do whatever it is. We want you to understand it. Okay, so today we went through a bunch of slides and talked about minimum requirements, design, setup, and use, hazard ID, and abatement methods for scaffolds. So, as it is, it's about 11:14 right now. I'll call that the end of the webinar, and I'll stay on here for a few more minutes. Thank you very much for attending today. And again, I'll stay on a few more minutes. But anyway, y'all have been great. And I'll look through the chat after the webinar and make sure that I didn't miss any questions. You're all welcome. I hope all of you have a great Labor Day weekend, and hopefully y'all get Monday off so you can rest. But anyway, you've all been good, and my contact information is at the front of the chat. And we have also at the front of the chat, there's also some PDF documents that you can open and save that have extensive information on scaffolds. One's a federal OSHA document, and one's a NCDOL document. So you'll find those again on OSHA.gov and labor.nc.gov. Yes, Eric, there is a training requirement for scissors lift employees. That's correct. So if you, I mean, it's a mobile scaffold that they use. They have to be trained. That's right. It does require training. Okay. So let's see. Okay, Eric. Yeah, that's fine. Your gut feeling was correct. They do have to be trained. Okay. Okay, usually your rental company can do this. Okay, yeah. Just make sure that they know everything they need to know on your work site. I would say training shall be documented. Otherwise, how would you have any proof of training? Okay, Wesley lost his audio. I don't know what happened, but the webinar's open. Sorry about that. Of course, you can't hear me. Can everybody else hear me? It's still on? Can everybody else hear me? Okay. Yes, okay. Okay, so Wesley, you have an audio issue. I'm typing that to him since he can't hear me. Okay, so with that said, again, you've all been great today. I'm going to go ahead and sign off. And again, you have a great day, and it's now about 11:17. So all of you have a great day, and it's now about 11:17. So all of you have a great Labor Day, and talk to you later. Bye-bye.